Today, we have the utter joy of hearing from 3 brave members of our congregation who will be sharing moments from their own spiritual journey. We've asked them to reflect on where their spiritual journey began, on a spiritual belief that they've discovered in their adult life, and how they came to that belief. Our guest speakers are Nancy Richardson, Emily Kizinga, and Tiki Inake Posey. Let me tell you just a little about each of them. Now retired, Nancy Richardson has been a member of this congregation for more than 50 years, during which time she has dabbled in various civic issues. Emily was raised in the UU Church of Fresno and keeps busy as a member of the worship arts team, as an instructional support coach in Central Unified School District, and she is the mom of the world's 2 cutest kids. Except for mine. Tiki Posey is a new member of UU, and they are currently a doctoral candidate for a PhD in psychology, and she is the owner of Inacam, a mindful communication business.
My religious journey began in Klamath Falls, Oregon, at the Episcopal Church. My father grew up Catholic, my mother Presbyterian, so they decided our family would go to the Episcopal Church. The minister taught the children parables. One was of a master who tasked his longtime worker with building him a house. Plentiful funds were supplied. The worker used inferior materials and kept the difference. When the house was completed, the master thanked the worker for his lifetime of labor and told him the house was for him, the laborer, and his family. Oops. I've always remembered that. For all these decades, I have heeded the parable, and I've never built a house. However, I have cheated. I ate some jelly beans from an Easter basket to be given to the minister's daughter who was sick. She was about my age. My mother had to have noticed that there were hardly any jelly beans left in the basket, but she didn't say anything, which made it even worse. I kept waiting for the consequences of my actions. My spiritual journey did not go smoothly. When I was about 5 years old, my mother decided she had to break me of my habit of swearing. So she bought as an incentive a glass toy telephone, filled it with, jelly beans, and put it on top of the upright piano until I could cease cussing. Yeah. You know that damn thing is still on top of the piano. While living in Portland, I discovered that the junior high and high school kids at the Episcopal Church skipped the church school class and went to the alley and smoked. I never smoked. My Episcopal life ended when, as a young adult, I took a class at an Episcopal church in Ventura, where I lived at the time, and I asked a lot of questions. The exasperated minister said, "You sound like a Unitarian." I didn't know what that was, but clearly it was not something good. A couple of decades ago at this church, I facilitated classes called Building Your Own Theology. Notice I didn't use any profanity in the title or anything, because I had grown up by then. I and the participants from our congregation learned a lot from one another and from the materials we assembled and studied. Some of those people are here today. Please raise your hand if you're one of those survivors. See? Oh, yes, good. Thank you. They were all excellent students. At the first class, I told them that they would be writing their own statement of beliefs by the end of the 8-week session. They were terrified. I assured them they could write it in pencil and change it throughout the rest of their life. At the end of each 8-week session, we closed with a potluck and a reading of those statements. The food, of course, was great, and the statements were always very affirming and powerful. Among other sources, we drew from the UU principles, which have been revised recently, but the old ones are still good. They speak of encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations and a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, etc. These principles reflect active and ongoing work, not a finite, concrete, immutable set of truths. Thus, a religious spiritual belief that I came to adopt an adult is that, metaphorically, our beliefs should always be written in pencil, not ink. It is our job to listen, learn, read, question, discuss, and grow. Our work is never finished. If in any 5-year period our beliefs remain unchanged, I think it means we have forfeited the opportunity to internalize new beliefs and practices we could have added to our fund of knowledge, understanding, and, yes, wisdom. We would have missed the richness of what lies before us and passed by the treasures that life offers. I've been a member of this congregation for over 50 years. I usually sit in the back because I like to meet new people who often sit in the back. I cherish all of the people, some of whom I've known for decades, some I know less well, and some I have yet to meet. It's an unending parade of delights. Finally, I will share with you my new personal daily spiritual practice. Lately, my eyes have, gone kind of bad. My doctor has me doing lots of stuff, including putting a hot compress on my eyes several times a day for 5 to 15 minutes. I like the eye mask like this. I realize you can't see it very well, but it has little beads in it, and you can put it in the microwave and heat it up, or you can chill it. You can't do much else when your eyes are covered. I have come to relish my multiple little vacations, and I've learned not to use that time to mentally organize what I need to get done by the end of the day. I recommend eye masks. I wish I had discovered them years earlier. Because I like you, I'm going to end by warning you that you must be very careful when you program the microwave for the number of seconds to heat the mask. Too many seconds and there will be an explosion in your microwave. That will affect how you spend the rest of your day. Lots of love to each of you.
Well, how do you follow that? As many of you know, I was raised Unitarian in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno. My parents tried out a service when I was about 3 years old, and as the story goes, the incredible Bernadette Siegel delighted in toddler Emily and made my parents feel loved and welcomed, and the rest is history. So it would seem that my religious journey began very early in my life, but I think it's easy as a Unitarian Universalist to just go with the flow of the good vibes and not have to think too hard about what you really believe, especially as a kid. But then I met other kids from other religious backgrounds, and as we entered high school in particular, we began to have very deep, very serious conversations about what we truly believed. I was privileged to grow up in a very diverse community of kids in this Central Valley. I had friends who were Christian, but also Buddhist, Muslim, agnostic, and atheist. When it came to defining my spirituality for my friends, as they began to question my beliefs from a place of curiosity, I always found it very difficult to nail the elevator speech. What did it really mean to be a Unitarian Universalist, and how could I give the magic of this place in my life more justice than the descriptor I so often relied on, hippie church? Owning my spirituality and being able to explain it is something that has coalesced for me very, very recently. I consider myself still very much on the journey of defining all of the complexities of what I believe, but one thing I know for sure is that love is at the center of it all. And this clarity really came for me in our faith's discussion of revising Article 2 and the new shared values flower, which I feel so beautifully and simply frames my elevator speech. For those that are unfamiliar, here is the flower. And apologies that the production value of the service drops significantly when Tim is away from the pulpit. The flower shows the values of justice, interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, and generosity, all spiraled around love at the center. Love is at the center. That truly does define my spirituality. There is a reason the great British philosophers known as the Beatles sang, "All you need is love." I believe love is absolutely central to living a good life and being in right relationship with others. I am always so touched by the power of the stories people share about this space being one of the first where they felt truly accepted to be as they are. If that isn't divine, I don't know what is. There is something really beautiful about opening up your heart to love and sharing that love with others. It's freeing, and it's so much of what makes us human. Love allows us to lose our breath at the sight of a beautiful sunset, delight in the wonder of a developing child, and weep when love is lost and we have nowhere for all of that love to go. Right on cue. Those that know me know that I am emotional. I care deeply about others, and I try to approach others with nothing but love for who they are and what they bring to the world. I am far from perfect at this, but I'm so proud to be part of a congregation that channels love into accepting others, fights for racial justice, and cares deeply for the earth, among other causes. My religious belief is that if we can center love, everything else should fall into place. Is it always easy to lead with love? No. Do I need to commit myself to the spiritual practice of love? Yes. As the Reverend Sherry Woodbury writes, love is the center and foundation of this faith. Love is the power that holds us together as a community. Because love is not only something we receive, but something we practice in community, let fall away all that might distract us from the wholehearted practice of love. Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. As we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow, may each unfold in wholeness, both deeply loving and truly loved. My hope is that by my going out into the world preaching the gospel of love, so the world may be healed by love's restorative power. And to borrow a phrase, may it be so. Blessed be. Amen.
So my spiritual journey starts with getting down, getting up, and remembering to do it all over again. It started with this deep struggle of being who I was and trying to be what the world wanted me to be. I was raised in foster care, and so I was raised by a minister and his wife, holiness Pentecostals, and I was different. And so I had a history of trauma, a history of abuse, and then to add to that history was the rejection of the people I loved so dearly. Years later, after foster care, my pastor sent me to a Pray the Gay Away conference. And there I was, young, naive, in a room full of 1,000 people at this conference. I had struggled for years about my sexual orientation and my gender identity. And my pastor sent me here, and he didn't explain what about, but my parents agreed I should go. So I snuck in at the very back with all these strangers. And then the minister began to speak. And he said, "Some of you need to forgive God for your siblings because you can't help who they are. You can't change it. And some of you need to forgive God for your parents because you can't change who they are and you can't help it." So I thought, okay, that makes sense. Like, I could live with that. And then he said, "Some of you need to forgive God for your gender if you were born in the wrong body." And I had never heard anyone ever say that my gender was wrong. It was just a conversation we didn't have. And when he said that I had to forgive God, I went beside myself. And I started to cry, and I said, how can I forgive you? That's a pretty bad mistake, God. And then how am I supposed to change it? Because I'm miserable not being me. And in my earnesty, I thought the best thing I could do is scream to the top of my lungs. So I did. Ah! In front of 1,000 strangers. Then I thought, well, what's the next best thing I could do? So I began to run down the aisle, way from the back. Now I'm screaming and running. Ah! And I threw myself in front of the stage, into the carpet, and I began to just weep and scream, because I just did not know what to do. Hours later, I woke up in the dark, in a dark auditorium, all alone. I cried so hard I blacked out. And I think I was more hurt by the fact that nobody did anything. I mean, I could have been dead. I was embarrassed, but that wasn't the worst part of it all. And then I got up, I wiped off my tears, and I said, okay, well, I refuse to be one of 1,000. I refuse to be like the 1,000 here who lacked a little kindness, who offered no dignity, no humanity. And I got up from there, and that was a part of my spiritual journey. I vowed never again to be one who would ever ignore the pain of another human being suffering. Years later, I met a wonderful transgender woman. I dated her. I fell in love with her. And I thought, well, what am I going to do about this, you know? And so I went to a conference that I was supposed to speak at, and I invited her to go in her hometown in Louisiana, New Orleans. And I secretly told all of her friends to show up at my talk. So they showed up one by one. But before that, on the way there, thousands of people were walking by in the streets of Louisiana, and I saw a man on the ground, and he was bleeding. And my wife-to-be, because I was planning on proposing at the conference, she looked at me, and I said, well, we gotta go. I gotta speak, we gotta go. That man, you know, somebody's gonna take care of him. And she said, baby, it doesn't work that way. And with those beautiful eyes, and she was early in her transition, so she, you know, could be picked out in a crowd. And here was this man on the ground in front of a nudie bar, and I'm thinking, we can't stop here. You're dressed so pretty. You're gonna be on stage with me pretty soon. And she said, it doesn't work that way, baby. I served my country, because she's in the Navy. And then there she was on her knees. She got down, and she started calling out, somebody call 911. 911, call 911. And she started giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And I looked at her, and I remembered all of a sudden who I was. She refused to let this man suffer alone. And all I could think about was her pretty clothes. I gotta speak soon. We gotta get. It all worked out. But your spiritual journey is all about getting down and getting up and remembering who you are. We shed light without spreading fire. And that day, if I had any doubts about proposing to the love of my life, who is now my wife, I lost all doubt that day, because she reminded me of who I was. I've been down, but I can get up, and I can't forget who I was meant to be.